Hello everyone, and thank you all for joining us today for our live webinar, What's New in SharePoint Server Subscription Edition with the one and only Todd Clint. My name is Patrick and I'm a sales manager here at Syskit. We will be joined by Todd as well as my colleague Igor, who will be showing us a demo of SPDocKit after the presentation. Many of you already know us as a company, but for those who don't, please let me briefly introduce you to Syskit. Syskit is a software development company founded more than 12 years ago. We develop products for SharePoint on-premise, documentation administration, as well as products for Office 365 governance and auditing. We currently have more than 3,000 customers around the world, and many of them are very well-known names, as you can see it at our slide. We currently have 5 products, including our famous SPDocKit for SharePoint on-prem documentation, as well as Syskit Point for Office 365 governance and security. Before we start, just a few housekeeping rules. All registrants will receive a recording of the webinar within a few days. After Todd's presentation, we will have a short demo of SPDocKit showing how it can help you with your SharePoint migration. We will then have a Q&A session with Todd where you can ask any questions you might have. So please use the Q&A function on the right side of your screen to ask your questions throughout the webinar. Now let me introduce Todd, if he needs any introduction. Todd is a Microsoft MVP SharePoint consultant and a very good friend of Syskit. Todd has been a SharePoint specialist for over 15 years and is one of the most influential people in the SharePoint community. He specializes in infrastructure administration topics for both SharePoint and Office 365. Also, Todd regularly contributes as a speaker at major conferences in the US, Asia, and Europe. I will now give a warm welcome and turn things over to Todd. Todd, are you ready?
I am. Let me turn my mic and all that on. All right. So go to webinars telling me that people can see me. So I apologize for that. All right. And let me show in here. Okay. So welcome everybody. Is my screen shut? My screen showing? Excellent. Okay. So welcome everybody. That was a great intro. I appreciate that. As I was listening to that, it says that I've been doing SharePoint for more than 15 years and I'm kind of working back and I'm like, man, it's almost 20. So I have had the pleasure of working with every version of SharePoint in production, starting way back in the day with SharePoint Team Services 2001 and up till the subscription edition that we're going to talk about today. It has been a wild and crazy journey. And it is also, as you were talking about the timeline, I've spent over half of it hanging out with you folks now, because I was with Tony, you know, back in the day when he was kind of kicking around this idea for SPDocKit. And well, I wasn't with him as part of that, but I knew him and all that. But it's been a wild and crazy ride. So every time this new versions of SharePoint come out, I just love talking about them. All right, so I've got the vanity slide here, mainly not so much so I can talk about myself, but so that you can contact me. Like they've got in the chat there, if you've got questions today, throw them in the chat and we'll talk about them live. And then the people who watch the recording will get to benefit from your insightful questions and my answers. But then after that, if you've got any questions, you can always email me. My email address is up on the screen. I'm also going to put the slide at the end. Not again because I'm, you know, like how I look on screen, but just so that you can see it at the end. Plus, it makes my slide deck look bigger so that people at Syskit think I'm working harder. You can go to my blog at toddclint.com. I work for Some Praxis Consulting, so you can go to our website and find out what we do and have us help you out. You can go to our Facebook page or my Twitter page. I threw that picture up there. I like to put new pictures on as I go through my headshots. I see pictures from like 4 and 5 years ago. So that's a picture of me from like 4 days ago. Those of you that have been to these things before, you'll notice my hair's a little longer than normal, things like that. But I went to a football game in Las Vegas over the weekend, so that was me at the football game. So it's a good time. Highly recommend going to Las Vegas for a football game. So why are we all here? Well, there's a new version of SharePoint Server, of on-prem server, and it's now called SharePoint Server Subscription Edition. So we had, 2001. So this is like the 8th version of SharePoint. Now we had 2001, 2003, 2007, so on. This one doesn't have a year on it anymore. And I know over the years, Microsoft and other companies have debated on whether they should put years at the end of product names. So that was part of the reason why they didn't have, they had Windows ME and Windows XP, because they didn't want to put an expiration date at the end. They were worried about that. And we'll notice now that SharePoint's not worried about having a date and locking it down. It's the subscription edition. And I think that tells us a lot about where Microsoft's mind is going with on-prem SharePoint. It is alive and kicking. Again, this version came out here a month ago. It's still there, but this is maybe probably the last, full version of SharePoint Online we're going to get. I have no insider knowledge about that. I don't think Microsoft has said that. This is just me speculating. For me, so in Zagreb, where Syskit's at, it's 5 in the afternoon. For me, it's 10 in the morning. I've got the coffee in me, so I might be speaking a little out of turn. But reading the tea leaves, it feels like this might be the last version of on-prem SharePoint. And I say that for a couple of reasons. Number one, the changes between SharePoint 2016 and 2019 were small-ish. If you look at the build numbers in the back, you'll notice that they all start with 16. Whereas with previous versions, it was 12 and 14 and 15. Now it's just kind of 16. That's just kind of where they're at. Just not a lot of changes around the product. And as you're looking, when they put the private preview out this summer, they had a big long blog post and talked about the philosophies behind SharePoint Server Subscription Edition. And one of them was continuous updates. And I thought that was an interesting thing. And when they talked about continuous updates, they were like, one of the things that they said is you'll end the long cycle of costly major version upgrades to get new features. So that tells me there's not going to be any more long and costly major updates, that it's just going to be kind of the base. And as new features come out, they've hopefully designed the platform in a way that will allow you to add those features. And I say that because obviously Microsoft wants everybody to have every workload in the cloud. That's really what their goal is. But they recognize that some folks can't do that. There are, regulatory issues in different businesses, or sovereignty issues, though Microsoft is doing a much better job handling that now. But there are just some customers that are not going to feel comfortable going to the cloud for everything. And so Microsoft knows they have to do this on-prem version. But I think their heart just isn't in it. I feel like they're kind of phoning it in. And this great product, but definitely I get the impression, well, I say it's almost a fact, that there are way more engineers and all that kind of stuff working on SharePoint Online than there are on SharePoint Server. So I say that because I want to get your expectations set around where on-prem is going to go, if you're kind of considering about, how much to stay there. And then also, if you're not already online, start looking that way, because that's where all the new things are going to show up. And I don't think we haven't been able to expect feature parity for a while between online and on-prem, and I believe that gap is just going to get wider. So if you see some new thing come out, it's always going to come out online first, and then it might come out on-prem, in subscription edition, but something to think about. One thing to look at when I was looking through the notes and playing with the bits is forever SharePoint has supported migrating from N-1. So when SharePoint 2007 came out, it could migrate from SharePoint 2003, which was N-1, but it could not migrate from SharePoint 2001, which would have been N-2. And that's always been the case. And that's Windows, that's Exchange, that's everything. You can usually go back one version. This might be the first time in my career of more than 15 years that I've seen a major product like this upgrade from N-1 and N-2. So this means when you put your SharePoint Server Edition farm in place, you can migrate from SharePoint 2019 and SharePoint 2016. So this is really cool. As a person who has done dozens, probably hundreds of SharePoint migrations and is actually doing some right now for customers. This comes up all the time. Like I've got a customer now because of technical reasons and political reasons inside of a large organization. They're on SharePoint 2013 and they want to go to 2019, and they've got some reasons that's forcing them off of 2013, but they can't go directly to 19 because they can't go N-2. So they're only moving to 2016 because they don't want to do 2 migrations. They don't want to use third-party tools. So for these folks, if SharePoint 2019 supported N-2, they would do that. So this is a big deal that this is an option for you. So if you've gotten stuck on SharePoint 2016, you can skip 2019 and go right to subscription edition. The fact that they're allowing N-2 migrations also suggests to me that there aren't a whole lot of changes, at the database level and all that from SharePoint 2019 to subscription edition. But this is awesome. The fact that they support that is great. Now, when you do your migrations, it's going to be a lot easier now because you can skip versions. I don't want you to get complacent about that. I don't want you to think that it's all going to be easy. When you do your migrations to subscription edition, you should do all of the due diligence you normally do for a migration. You should, as I colloquially put it, don't upgrade crap. And that crap can be content, that can be Word documents from 1993 that are still in SharePoint that you might not need anymore. That can be features, that can be some great solution or feature that you're using that has snowflakes chase your mouse cursor around or something. When you still need to be aware of that. And since the platform hasn't changed significantly from 2016 or 2019 to subscription edition, you'll be able to leverage a lot of your architectural designs if you want to. The CPU and memory requirements for SharePoint Server haven't changed a lot in several versions. The product is now scaling out in number of servers, so each individual server uses roughly the same resources. So if you've got a good platform for 2016 or 2019, I'm not saying copy that platform, but I would absolutely use that as a starting point for designing your SharePoint, your subscription edition platform. So, have a good idea what that looks like as you're, planning your upgrade. One of the new things that shows up in the subscription edition is stronger integration with the cloud. So the idea that you've got hybrid connections between your on-prem environment and your online environment. I'm going to talk a little bit later, not in a lot of depth, but the connection between on-prem servers and Power Apps and Power Automate is getting stronger. That's one of the big troubles that people have is, workflows on-prem are kind of stagnant now. SharePoint 2010 workflows, we're going to talk about those a little later, are almost completely dead. 2013, the workflow management server, or workflow manager, that was kind of a swing and a miss a little bit, but Power Apps or Power Automate is really the cool new workflow engine, but people on-prem can't really take advantage of that. So with subscription edition, there's going to be there's better hooks into that. But again, Microsoft really wants you to move your content and your workloads to the cloud, and they begrudgingly recognize there are some that need to be on-prem, but boy, anything they can pull off into Office 365, they are going to do. So just know that that's where they're designing the product. There are also a lot of security improvements in subscription edition. And these are things like the big one that gets shown is that if you install this on Windows Server 2020, I think it's 2020, you can then use TLS 1.3. So this is, encrypting all the traffic between your clients and the servers. This is one of these things that I've, watched move in my career, and still for old folks like myself, it's still tough. I recommend everybody use HTTPS, TLS on-prem even. Back in the day when I was, a budding SharePoint administrator, when my hairline was a little farther forward and things like that, we didn't ever do it. We just did HTTP everywhere. HTTPS had this boogeyman of increased overhead on our SharePoint servers. I remember at the time hearing things like, if you enable SSL, it's going to kill the performance on your SharePoint server by 10% because of all the decoding and encoding and encrypting and decrypting and all that. Those days are gone. I don't know that you can really feel any performance difference using HTTPS. So my advice to anybody who's installing a new on-prem server is just do TLS across the board. And if you've got subscription edition now on Windows 2020, you can do TLS 1.3, which is the best TLS. So definitely consider moving up to that when you move to subscription edition. Also, kind of under the umbrella of security improvements, Microsoft has added some authentication improvements. So now it supports OpenID Connect and some other third-party things. And you know that comes from the fact that in the cloud, there's all these federation things. And so they're borrowing some of those bits. But that's great because it makes it a much better environmental citizen, because a lot of places now on-prem are using third-party authentication providers so that they can do all kinds of great things, control devices and control logins. The authentication, like if I had to start my career today and being, a trophy husband wasn't on the roadmap for me, being identity, and security would probably be where I would start, because there's so many fun things there and so many great ways to play with the technology. And so I like that SharePoint now supports these things. And then on the back of that, one of the problems we've always had with SharePoint is, especially when you add multiple authentication providers and things like that, is the people picker and just getting that thing wrangled. And so part of the authentication improvements is increased support for other authentication providers, and then more tools with the people picker to help you corral all those people. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a later slide. One thing that I don't have on this slide, but kind of the elephant in the room, is what subscription edition means. And Microsoft has not been real forthcoming about what all that subscription bit means. So I'm going to speculate a little bit here. And again, no insider knowledge or anything like that. This is just me kind of guessing. There's always been, well, not always, but for a long time, there's been the ability to license SharePoint. You could always just plunk down some money and own that version of SharePoint Server 2013, whatever, forever. But you could always have software assurance, which was you paid software assurance for SharePoint without a version at the end. And then as long as you were paying software assurance, your SharePoint servers were covered. And when a new version came out, you just got that as part of your software assurance. My guess is there's going to be something similar to that shows up for subscription edition. I don't know what it's going to look like, and Microsoft has not said. And I looked around to see what their licensing looked like, and the licensing for subscription edition looks exactly the same on the Microsoft pages as the previous version. So I don't know, but that will be something to keep an eye on as to what that licensing looks like. Now, the other thing that I will say is at no point in SharePoint's history have they really honored any sort of licensing. So if you threw an enterprise edition key into your SharePoint server and lit up the SharePoint CALs for all your users, there was no way that it checked that. So I'm curious if that stuff's been baked in to SharePoint Server or not, subscription edition. But that's something I'm kind of curious. That didn't really come to light when it came out, but I'm curious what that licensing is going to look like. So what things about this really excite me, really light my fire? A bunch of things. Windows Server 2022, of course. So all the stuff I said about having Windows Server 2020 for TLS, imagine that I said Windows Server 2022. We'll go back and fix this in post when we do the recording. Demir, make a note on that. So what things excite me? So one, and this is such a silly one, and I am such a nerd for getting excited about this and putting it at the top of the list of the things that excite me. When SharePoint moved to PowerShell with SharePoint 2010, a mere 11 years ago, I was aghast because I had done a whole lot with STS-ADM, which was the previous command line utility. The first book that I ever wrote anything for, the chapter was on STS-ADM. The first big presentation I did at Tech Ed was on STS-ADM. The first magazine article that I had published on SharePoint was on STS-ADM. I named my cat STS-ADM. I mean, it was just a big deal. And then SharePoint 2010 comes out and they're like, we've got great news. It's all PowerShell. I was just horrified because that was STS-ADM was my buddy. And I'm not just talking about the cat, I mean the utility. And I just didn't figure I would ever be able to learn PowerShell. I just didn't think I was smart enough. Now, fast forward 12 years, and I do PowerShell all the time. I've got multiple PowerShell windows open. I think I dream in PowerShell. I love it. The SharePoint server product has stuck to this really weird idea of having a snap-in as opposed to a module because of some architectural decisions that were made, 15 years ago. The new version subscription edition, PowerShell is a module, not a snap-in. Hallelujah. Can I get an amen? I'm very excited about that. And it just makes all my PowerShell stuff work better because all of the ways I'm used to loading modules and doing that all now works with SharePoint. So that's great. You still need to run it on the SharePoint server. It still touches the object model, but it is a module. So I already mentioned in the previous thing about Windows Server 2022 being supported. So it's supported as a platform, and then it gives you TLS support and all that, but also Windows Core. So now this stripped down version of Windows, it doesn't have the UI and all that. That is great. You've got a lower attack vector, lower requirements for hardware and all that. I'm very excited about that. If you do decide to go that route, there are special installation instructions. So we'll talk about the installation later, but that's a fun one. I like how they're thinking on that. We talked about the N-2 upgrade functionality. I'm excited about that, but also service connections. So if you're a big enough organization, you might have a services farm. Now you could always connect to a previous version. Now you can connect 2 back. So I'm a big fan of that. One of the things that's always been kind of a bugaboo with SharePoint is how it handles IIS bindings. And working with a customer now who's doing an upgrade, and as we're installing their farm, one of the pieces of advice that I always tell customers is when you create your web apps, you always do this in a test environment and migrate data over, and then eventually that test environment becomes your production environment. Always create your web apps with what the final most correct name will be. And it's because of how SharePoint didn't handle IIS bindings well. You could get into this weird situation where your server works fine on multiple URLs, but if you add the server or remove the server from the farm and add it back in, some of that goes away. Anytime you make a change in IIS Manager, SharePoint wouldn't know about it, and so it couldn't, didn't get rid of the configuration database, all that. They've fixed most of that. So now when you add host headers to an IIS bindings to a web app, there was some really squirrely ways you could add it to SharePoint before. Now it's a real live little boy. There's commandlets that add all that, so you can handle that better. Also now, and I'm not sure how this will be a good thing, you can also add host headers and IIS bindings for central admin, so it doesn't have to be on an odd port anymore if you don't want it to. Part of the magic that makes that work is SNI, which is a server name indicator. So one of the kind of chicken and the egg problems that the web had before was when you're encrypting all of the traffic, with TLS, one of the things that's encrypted is the name of the server. And if you have multiple websites on the same box, how do they know which certificate to unravel? So SNI is a way for that to work, and SharePoint has much better support for that. And then also SSL, and I should say certificate management, not SSL management, but SharePoint can now monitor your SSL certs, your TLS certs, and let you know when they're going to expire, things like that. And that comes up all the time, and I'm super excited about those things. PowerShell is such an important thing. I believe that it deserves its own slide and part of the previous slide. I won't spend a lot of time on this because we got a couple of things to talk about, but these were some of the neat PowerShell changes that I liked. I mentioned a little earlier that there were people picker commandlets now. Part of this is because STS-ADM is gone now. For the last couple of versions of SharePoint, STS-ADM has been deprecated. There's a big long definition for it, but really what that means for Microsoft folks is we may take this away at any moment. Don't continue to rely on it. So they've actually done it. They've followed through on that. STS-ADM is gone. And before they could do that, they had to fill in all the holes. There were still a bunch of things in SharePoint 2019 that you could only do with STS-ADM, and they've fixed that now. One of them was the people picker. There are 13 commandlets for the people picker that help you decide for a site and for your farm what names show up and which authentication providers have preference and things like that. It's a little ugly because it's very fiddly, but most of the scenarios that I've run up against have shown up in there. So check those out. And for any of these kind of things, I always do like a get command, star people star, and I can see the commandlets in there. So there's a lot of great things in there. If you've got multiple authentication providers or things like that, check those out. One of the itches that STS-ADM scratched, and I had to use it just within the last week, is if you've got a persistent object of some sort, and the object can be anything, a web, a document, a service app proxy, whatever, that you just won't listen to reason anymore. You could use STS-ADM to just yank that object out of the config DB. And it's a horrible thing to do. It's like doing a lobotomy, but sometimes that's just the only way to fix a thing. And again, I had to use it this last week. So now there is a commandlet for that, remove SP configuration object. I hope that nobody on this call ever has to use that because it means things have gone horribly awry, but it is in there if we need it. I talked in the previous slide about the IIS bindings and all that kind of, all those great things you can do. There are commandlets now to manage that. So set SP web application and the analogous one for central admin now allow you to add those host headers and bindings that you used to have to do manually in IIS. Now you can do them in SharePoint. The beauty of that is twofold. Number one, you get to do it in PowerShell. That's a big win. And number two, it ends up getting written to the configuration database. So as you add new servers to your farm, things like that, that gets pushed out. And finally, nobody likes the distributed cache, not even the distributed cache's mother. But one of the things that they have done with this version is added some more commandlets to help you manage the distributed cache. The distributed cache does a lot of great things. It helps, logins and things like that. But I'm terrified of it. Like I'm afraid to make eye contact with it. I'm afraid to speak its name. But these PowerShell commandlets will help with the management of that a little bit. But again, all of this is just so that we can make STS ADM, let it fade off into the sunrise the way that it deserves. I've spent a lot of time talking about the nerdy admin things, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the prettier stuff, the aesthetic pieces. The UX got a lot of improvements. And again, I spend most of my time interacting with SharePoint online, so I've kind of lost track of what doesn't work in SharePoint on-prem because I just don't use it as much. But really what this is moving some of those features that we're used to and functionality from SharePoint Online back into on-prem. So now we've always had document sets, but now in Subscription Edition, they have the modern look. Lists and libraries had modern looks in 2019, but it was like read-only. You couldn't do everything. Couldn't drag and drop files, things like that. In modern, that works better now. We've got some different views now, thumbnails, things like that we didn't have in 2019. The ability to do bulk check-ins and checkouts, we can do now in the modern UI in SE. The search results page has the modern look to it. You can do some more things with that. And I mentioned earlier having some better integration with Power Apps and Power Automate. So they really want you to see how tasty that is up in the cloud and hopefully start moving your workloads there. So now there's places inside of the UI now that will do that. And if we get to the demos, I don't have it set up, but a lot of these things, obviously, like the Power Apps and Power Automate bit, is predicated on you having a hybrid environment. And by hybrid, I mean your Windows AD is syncing to Azure AD. So Todd on-prem is the same as Todd online, and everybody knows who that is. And then also starting, SharePoint 2010 sort of, but certainly SharePoint 2013 and 2016, this idea of taking your SharePoint farm and making it a hybrid, having cloud search and all those kind of things, introducing your on-prem farm to your online environment, and there's a coding process and exchange of gifts and all that. But having all that in place is important. You need to have that in place before you can do Power Apps and Power Automate stuff. So make sure you do all that. What have we lost? So this is like, in the US, when we have like the Oscars and that kind of stuff, they always have a part of the show where they play very sad music in a minor key, and they talk about the actors and producers and directors and stuff that we've lost over the last year. This is sort of what that slide is. I don't have any music to play, but I do have a very sad looking cat to really set the mood correctly. But these are some things as you're moving forward to think about as you're looking at your migration process. Deprecated, we've added to the deprecated list SharePoint 2010 workflows. I don't think there's any surprise to that other than the fact that they haven't just been taken out completely. We lost SharePoint 2010 workflows in the cloud a year ago, and I'm guessing they'll pull that out of the on-prem product as quickly as they can without there being rioting. So again, deprecated means the 2010 workflows will continue to work when you take your 2016 database and drop it into a subscription edition farm. All of those workflows will continue to work, but I just wouldn't put any more time into making those. And if you haven't done it already, there are some tools out there that will help you find those workflows in your farm. They're really easy for our users to create, which is great, but as an admin, it's tough for us to keep track of them. So this would be a good time as you're making your migration process, find those and see if they're even being used, if you can get rid of them, or if they can be moved to something more modern. And things we've flat out lost, STS ADM, I talked about that. All of the access services, so we had access services 2010 and access services 2013, they are kaput, they are gone. All of the grooves, so this means the Groove client, the Groove API, all of those things that have the word groove in them are now out of the product. Rayazi is very sad, I'm sure. And then Performance Point, which relied heavily on a big Silverlight control, that has also been removed. So hopefully, you're not using that anymore, but if you are, you won't be able to move that up to subscription edition. One last minute to look at the sad cat. All right, on to our next slide. So my goal for you all is to be super excited about all of this and go out and kick the tires, go out and see what's going on with this. So like all the previous versions of SharePoint, you can download it for free. They've got evaluation keys out there. So go do that. I'm gonna have a link here and another slide that takes you to a blog post that has all these links in it. But so you can go out and do that. When you do the download, which is what that link goes to, it's very sparse looking page, but there's a section called install instructions, and there's like 14 paragraphs in there that talk about links to the install guides. The keys that you need are in that install instructions, so go do that. I've got Windows Server 2020 in here. I probably mean Windows Server 2022. We will fix that in post as well. That's what I put it on. It worked pretty well. SQL Server 2019, and you'll need CU5 for that. And there's no reason to name any names, but if you do just browse through and install whatever, and you just install SQL Server 2019, when you try to create your configuration database, like on the screen here, it will tell you that you've got the wrong version. So then you just need to add CU5 to that, and then you're good to go. And if you are putting the server in Azure, so an Azure infrastructure thing, you can use the Azure SQL for that as well. The install itself hasn't changed a lot. So if you've installed previous versions of SharePoint, certainly for this first version, there's a lot of, or the first install, there's a lot of next, finish. That will give you a version to just play with, practice your migrations. One change is previous versions of SharePoint would come with like a SQL Express or something like that. This one doesn't. So you'll need to get a SQL Server 2019 demo version or something. I'm a couple of minutes over, but golly, I want to just kind of drop in and take a look at it, show it to you. So if the folks at Syskit don't mind, I'm going to do that. So this is SharePoint Server Subscription Edition. I'm logged in as me. I've got an unprivileged account. You can see this looks a lot like SharePoint Online. We've got our hero web part up here. The controls look very similar. Again, they're bringing, Microsoft's got this delicate balance that they've got to make. They want to have great functionality and get people excited about it, but they also don't want to give so much that you just don't go to online. So they want to tease you a little bit, and so that's really the delicate balance they're trying to find here. But we've got, the things look pretty similar to SharePoint Online. So we've got all that. We've got the search bar. We don't have the suite nav search up there. We've got search over here. I really hated the suite nav search in the middle when it first came out, and now I've gotten used to it. I'm a little offended that it's not here. But this is a communication site, so we know what that we're pretty used to that. I'm going to switch over here. This is a new team site. So this is just a regular collaboration site using a team site template. Again, looks pretty familiar, not a lot of changes. We've got search up here. We've got the sharing links and that. And we've got a search site here. I don't have a lot of content in here yet, but we can do an enterprise search. And we've got all the regular things. And I've just got some lorem ipsum kind of documents in here right now. For the central admin experience, again, it just doesn't look that different. So here I am logged in as the farm account. We've got our configuration wizard to do the hybrid connection. One thing I'm a little offended at is they've got a link here to SharePoint updates. It doesn't go to my blog with my updates. It goes to their blog with their updates. And frankly, I'm a little offended by that. But they've got the documentation links. Again, most things look pretty similar. If we look at managed web apps, you're going to see a lot of real familiar things in here. You will notice I don't have SSL installed everywhere. I will take care of that at some point, but I do recommend SSL all over central admin and all that. But if you've used previous versions of SharePoint, you're gonna feel pretty comfortable finding things in here. I think that's really it for that. I just wanted to make sure y'all got to see it. So again, I'm kind of running long on time. I promised Demir and Igor that I would only go 30 minutes, and here it is 35. So let me do one last slide. These are some resources. That top one is a blog post of mine that I put out here a month or so ago that has all of the links for the kind of the things below it. So you can go to that blog post and get the links to the install and all that. But there's some other things. Kind of the one that I want to call out. There's the one right below mine. So AKA MS. That's the kind of the jumping off spot for this. And then the bottom one, Tech Community. If you have questions, things like that, go to Tech Community and ask those in the SharePoint group. Finally, here is my contact information. I think you'll probably get it when Syskit folks send out the thing at the end, but feel free to reach out, say hey, or anything like that. So I could go on for hours about SharePoint and my love of it, but I think it's time for the Syskit folks to talk a little bit. So Igor or Demir, whoever, you want to grab the mic and take it from here.
Okay. Thanks, Todd, for the awesome presentation. So remember, everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them for our Q&A session with Todd. But before that, we are going to turn things over to Syskit Quality Assurance Coordinator, Igor, for a quick demo on how SPDocKit can help you with your SharePoint migration. Igor, are you ready?
Yeah, ready. Let me
Excellent.
just share my screen. Can you see SPDocKit?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So let's get started then. Okay, so for those of you who are new to SPDocKit, SPDocKit is a SharePoint administration tool that helps SharePoint administrators and SharePoint consultants to basically document the SharePoint environments, to manage the farms, and to see what's going on inside of the SharePoint environment. So I will show you how you can utilize SPDocKit to prepare for the migration, and afterwards how you can document and keep track of what's going on inside of your SharePoint farm. So SPDocKit works on the principle of snapshots. So when you take a snapshot with SPDocKit, you gather all of the information that you might need when looking at your SharePoint farm. So I have a snapshot prepared here. I will open it. And before I do a migration, as Todd said, so you want to take care of the things that you have. So you want to make sure that this is the content that you want to migrate, that is used, and that your users actually use. So here at the first glance, I can already see how many web applications, site collections, also solutions I have deployed in my SharePoint farm. So I can, if I'm interested in a specific report regarding that, I can just click here and it will open a detailed report, and I can easily see where my content databases are and so on. So first, I will actually, before I migrate, do an inventory, check out what I have. Also, what's pretty important are the service applications. So some of them you might have running, some of them not. So you can also see all of the information about them here in the Farm Explorer. Also, when you, for example, migrate the search service, you will also have to move a couple of databases, so you can easily see where these are stored and you can take care of that. As Todd already mentioned, so when you basically plan for your new environment, you should also take into consideration the requirements. So you can see all of the information about your servers, so the hardware specs and so on. So you can build on top of that and create your new SharePoint environment. The next thing that you want to see is if you maybe have some solutions deployed. So for example, I have a couple of them here. So you want to check if those are actually used, if you need them moving forward. And the next thing that also Todd mentioned are the workflows. So I just switched quickly here to the analytics and usage reports section. So here I have a specific report that shows me all of the workflows that I have inside of my environment. So here at a glance, I can see if there are any active workflows, so SharePoint 2010, which are being deprecated. So if I would have any active workflows, I have to decide how to integrate them into the new farm. So if I just drop them as I have them here, maybe in some time they will be not functional anymore. So I have to keep that in mind. Since we're here in the analytics part, I will also show you the reports that might help you when you want to find out which of the content is actually being actively used. So we have a couple of analytics reports here that can help you with that. So all the way up from the farm level, you can see the number of site collections that you have and those which are actually used. You can drill down further and see the particular site collections that are used, and you can even go a bit deeper and see the sub-site level. So all the sub-sites that actually have some visitors and that are being used. If we switch the view a bit, so we also have specific reports which can help you detect all the inactive stuff, so unused, unmodified, and so on. So the first one is the inactive subsites report. So you can see easily when it was last accessed or modified. So you can decide if maybe, I don't know, something is not active for a year. Probably you should not move it to the new environment. So to keep your environment clean and just have the content that is used. We also have the unmodified list, so we go a bit deeper in the content hierarchy. So I can also see when some list was modified. If it was not modified in a while, maybe it is already deprecated also. And we can also go to the documents level. So here you can also see documents that are quite old, but just because they are old doesn't mean that they are not being used. So you can see when they were modified, so if the content is up to date and being used. The last thing that I want to show you here is a couple of permission reports. So when moving forward, you basically want to engage all of the users that are some kind of administrators in your environment, because they will also help you with the migration. So to clean up the site collections, the content in them, and other things. So I will open the users with privileged access report here. So at a glance, I can see all of the site collection administrators that are responsible for a specific site. So I can ask them to tell me if this is something that they're using, or I can get rid of before moving on to the new environment. And of course, we have a lot of cleanup reports here that basically show you, okay, some of the stuff that you have inside of your site collections is not being used. So for example, here we have groups without users, and with a click I can get rid of them and make sure that I don't drag something unnecessary along with me to the new environment. So this is this is creating the inventory before you actually do the migration. So once you're done with the migration, you should of course generate some kind of documentation. So here with SPDocKit, I will just switch back to the Farm Explorer. In SPDocKit, you have the capability to basically generate the complete documentation with 2 clicks, and you can decide which of the reports that you have inside of the Farm Explorer you want to include. So maybe I don't want to include these reports. I can also change the positioning inside of the documentation I click generate, and I have the set of all of these reports that you see here. I have them inside of a file, and I can share it with the stakeholders or just back it up for future reference. But also I want to make sure that I configured my SharePoint farm correctly. So maybe I want to see if I have all of the services online that I had in the previous version, so I can compare farms. So the old snapshot with the new snapshot of my new farm. As you can see here, we also have the capability to compare between servers, web applications, permissions, and so on. But for now, just for this demo, I will focus on farms. So these are basically two different farms, and I will select the snapshots. I already have a SharePoint subscription edition SharePoint here, so I'll choose that. And since these are separate environments, I can basically say, okay, let's compare this to that. So I can choose which servers to compare, which accounts, service applications, and also host names, so for the web applications. So once I'm done with that, I will get a report which says, okay, here are the differences. So I can easily see all of the differences between the farms. So here I have the old snapshot. So here I have SharePoint 2019 farm. On the right-hand side, I have the new subscription edition. And if I'm, for example, interested in services, I can easily see the differences that I have. So for example, this service was disabled in the old farm, but in the new farm, it is online. So maybe that's something I want to have, or maybe something that is misconfigured. So I can take care of that. All of the reports I can easily export, so save to an Excel or Word file, or I can also schedule an alert. So if some differences occur between the snapshots, I will get notified via email and get this report right in the email and see what's going on in my SharePoint farm. And the last thing I want to show you, well, maybe not the last, but SPDocKit has a lot of features, so I could ramble on forever. But one of the things you can do is to see if your new environment is configured according to the Microsoft's best practices. So we have over 200 reports that show, okay, this is something that you could do better, some configuration that you can do better. I will just show a quick example for the free disk space. So it says, okay, you have some warnings here on this server for this disks, but I can also customize these values. So I can do that per edition. I can say, okay, that's really not true. I need more space. So it will then apply your new settings. You can also choose to ignore some practices or best practices, or even create your own, but that would take a bit too long for this demo. So moving forward, once you do all of this, so configure your SharePoint farm and you're sure that everything is configured as it should be, of course, afterwards you can also track all the analytics. So if everything's used, the content is used, you can also take a look of the audit log details, so you can see at a glance what was happening inside of your SharePoint farm. So if you have any incidents, you can see who's responsible and take some actions. Of course, you can also manage permissions. I didn't show that, but if you want to perform an access review, so permission review, you can do that easily inside of SPDocKit. So you can see the whole structure of your SharePoint environment. You can see all of the permissions, and you can easily manage them with the help of these actions here available in the upper ribbon. So I think I covered all the stuff. Of course, SPDocKit provides you with a lot of functionality, but if you have any specific use cases, get in touch with Syskit crew and we'll try to help you any way we can. So this is it from me. I'll give it back to Patrick.
Thanks, Igor, for the excellent presentation. So now it's time for the Q&A session with Todd Clint. So please feel free to ask anything using the Q&A session. Todd, are you ready?
Excuse me, yes, took a big drink right before. Yes, ready as I will ever be. You can't stump me, I guess is what.
Great. We have quite good questions from the audience, so thank you very much for everyone that submitted the question. So the first question we have from Peter, thank you for your presence here, is an added gateway needed for the SE to use Power Apps like 2019?
So Peter, I have not set it up, but yes, I'm guessing that there is. So for those of you that aren't Peter and haven't set this up before, obviously when you use Power Automate and Power Apps in the cloud, all of the data is also up there, so Microsoft knows how to get to it. When you do it with on-prem, you have to have a thing called a data gateway, and that's a process that sits on a server inside your premises, and then you tell it, here's how you get to my line of business application, or here's how you get to my database, or here's how you get to SharePoint, and then it talks to the cloud up so the Power Automate can do its stuff. I have not set that up with 2019, but I assume you still need that. I have not given that much thought, but I can't think of how else they would get that data. So yeah, I think you probably need that.
Okay, great, thanks, Todd. So the next question is from Rick. Thank you again for your question. Is the PowerShell module pnp.powershell?
Rick, I like the way you think. No, it is not the PNP module. It is one from Microsoft. For those of you that haven't already started using it, the PNP PowerShell module is amazing. If I had any more kids, I would probably name one of them PNP PowerShell. It is a community-led effort. Microsoft guides it. They're like the puppet masters, but it's all community folks like myself and other people that write these commandlets and documentation and things like that. That module only, for the last year or so, has only really been for the cloud. There is an on-prem version, but they have mostly gotten rid of on-prem support. So I don't know if like the 2019 on-prem PNP module will work with subscription edition. I would guess that it would, but the module that shows up in here is absolutely from Microsoft. Comes right out of Redmond. But I love to hear people using the PNP PowerShell. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Todd. And thanks, Rick. A second question from Rick. Will SPFX be the same online as on-premise?
It is not the same version. And it is supported, but it's not the same version. And I can't remember which version because I don't write programs, so I don't remember. But that is documented somewhere. So if you can't find it in the documentation, Rick, and I think it's there, then try the tech community, because I know there was a conversation about it in tech community, one of the more recent ones, that says which version it supports. And if you can't find it there, then reach out to me and I'll find it, because we've got some developers here. They look into that, but it is a newer version, but not the newest version.
Okay, thanks, Todd. Yeah, we have actually a similar question from Urs. Urs asked what version of SPFX is used in the SharePoint subscription edition, and any indication on if this is the one of the new features regularly parts?
Yeah, so whether they will update that or not. So SPX, and I found the article on that. So it looks like the GA version of Subscription Edition will support SharePoint Framework 1.4.1. And I don't know what any of that means, but the first comment by somebody outside of Microsoft is, this is very disappointing. So I guess that's not a great version. So for the organizers, I will put this in the chat, and then you can throw it out to the rest of the folks as to where that goes. Now, as to the second question about whether that will get updated or not, I don't know. Okay, so the same thing from Troy Starr, who's been at Microsoft on the SharePoint team forever, said the way the subscription edition is architected, they can add functionality after GA, and the framework version they support may change in the future. So they have the ability to change that. Doesn't say they will, it says they can.
Okay, great. Thanks, Todd, and thanks, Urs, for the question. We have another question from Dominic. So he's asking if you cannot switch between modern UI and classic UI only. So it's basically only modern UI.
I think so, Dominique. I've not tried to switch to classic. It kind of offends me, so I haven't even looked to see if that's there. But I do. Oh, no, sorry, I tried to click on. I do have the demo thing set up. So if you if you send me an email, Dominique, I will poke around and try it and let you know if I can find a way to go back to classic. I do know that like there are templates for classic team sites still in there, but I don't know how that modernization process works. So for those of you that haven't done it in SharePoint Online, modernization, it's a property of an object. So a site can be modern or classic, a list or a library can be modern or classic, so on. The page can be modern or classic. And I don't know how that breaks down with the on-prem version. But if you send me a link or send me a URL or hit me up on Twitter or something, I'll poke around and let you know what I find.
Okay, thanks, Todd. So yeah, from the chat, we have one last question. This one is for Igor. Igor, if you are ready, will it be possible to exclude web.config configuration segments from the compare? For example, a front-end server has an IIS blob cache, but an application server doesn't. I think currently it throws a warning because of this mismatch.
By default, I think this is not a feature that is currently available, but you can ping us with more details and I'll forward it to the team and we can see what we can do, because we already, I believe, did some of the things similar to that with some other comparisons, so it could be done, I think. But give us a shout and we'll take a deeper look at that.
Okay, great. I believe we reached the end of the questions as of now. So, but again, you can reach out to Todd as he informed the channels that you can reach out to him and also to us at any time. Todd, some last words that you want to provide before we go?
So Dominic, I've got good news. This just in, I looked in one of my document libraries that I created as modern, and you can roll the document library back to classic. So we got that going for us. So last words, this has been great. I haven't been excited about on-prem stuff for a while because of all the great things going on in the cloud, but the subscription edition and the way they're melding the two has got me excited again. So if you're doing on-prem things, I would like to hear what you're doing and help me stay excited about it. But thanks for the opportunity. Thanks to everybody at Syskit. Thanks for everybody that showed up, and keep in touch.
Great. Yeah. Once again, thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. As mentioned, everyone who's registered for this event will receive a recording of the webinar within a few days. If you have any further questions regarding SPDocKit or any of our products, please reach out to us at sales@syskit.com. It was a pleasure having you all here, and see you next time.
Bye, everybody.